All right, we'll get started. It is 2 o'clock Eastern Time. You are tuned into Google Analytics for PR professionals, the basics of Google Analytics. My name is Christopher Penn. Hi to everyone on Periscope. I apologize, you kind of get the cheap seats because you're on a different tripod. Today's webinar is going to be talking about Google Analytics specifically and how it applies to the public relations profession. A bit of background before we begin. Shift Communications is to our knowledge, the first and only public relations first PR firm that is a Google Analytics certified partner. There are, of course, many certified partners in the world, but in terms of PR agencies, I believe we are still the only ones who hold that distinction, hence why we are having this webinar today. For logistical stuff, for those of you who are watching on the live stream, if you would like to tweet questions that you have about the webinar, please do so using the GAPR101 hashtag. You can just wire that straight into Twitter if you want. That's where we'll be checking Q&A because this is, of course, a Google Hangout. This presentation is being recorded and it is going to be posted up on YouTube and also on our homepage. If you're watching this on the Shift Communications website, then pretty straightforward. The page that you're on right now is the page where the webinar will live all the time. And everyone who has registered through the online form, this is for you Periscope people. If you have not already registered online to get the slides and the recording, go ahead and do so. Go to the Shift Communications website, shiftcom.com, and you'll find the resources tab, and there's a link to the webinar in there, and you too can get these slides and the recording emailed to you for your convenience. So before we begin, a couple of assumptions that we have to make. Number one, I'm going to assume that you who are watching this have access to Google Analytics, and you have the ability to make changes based on what you find. Because obviously, if you have access to Google Analytics and you have no ability to change, it's going to be a really frustrating experience for you. So we're going to work with those two assumptions. If that's not true, then well, enjoy the webinar. Let's talk about the problem that almost everyone in the public relations field has. We have what's called the madmen problem, which is we're used to just kind of doing stuff, and we do stuff, but there isn't really necessarily an expectation that we're going to do stuff that has a measurable outcome. It's kind of been the way PR has been for really since the beginning of the profession over 100 years ago. We just kind of do things and we go off of instinct a lot. And that used to be fine. That used to be more than enough to get the results we wanted, to make clients happy, to make our stakeholders, if you're at in the internal communications role at a company, happy. But what we ran into is that we stayed here in the Mad Men era while the rest of the world went to the Jerry Maguire era, which is, say, show me the money. Everybody wants to know, how is public relations actually working? Is it actually doing anything for my company? Is there any measurable benefit, measurable output that is, well, worth something? Or is it all simply just fluff? Today's webinar and in general is about the solution, which is Google Analytics. This is how we're going to bridge, because Google Analytics is an incredibly capable product of measuring not just what's happening on a website, but all of your digital marketing inputs and outputs. If it's happening and it's measurable online, from mobile devices to desktop to tablets, it is something that you should be able to check in on. Before we dive into the nuts and bolts of it, let's look at how this works in terms of a strategy. This is what Google Analytics can measure, top to bottom. It can measure your audiences. It can measure lead generation. It can, with some clever wiring, integrate with a sales CRM or a marketing automation system and measure how often people are coming back from certain specific sales pages. And it can even measure customer service to a degree, again, by looking at how often people come back and forth to your website. All of this is, it's an amazing application, but think about what we as public relations professionals, again, inside a corporation or at an agency, think about what we value. Imagine for a moment that you work in a coffee shop, and this coffee shop sells coffee, as coffee shops do. and you want to get more customers. Well, where are you going to get more customers? You can certainly ask the existing customers that you have to come in and bring a friend, and that certainly works. You could run some ads maybe. But one of the things public relations is really good at doing, if we go back up here for a second, what public relations is really good at is using the media to build audiences. We can get people to your coffee shop. There's a great story in the local newspaper, or a great story on television, or a great story on social media about your coffee shop and the fact that you have, handpicked, individually selected, artisan roasted coffee beans. Get 1 cup per day because people in the back have to pick through each bean manually. But if the door to your coffee shop is locked, public relations can't help you, right? We can get people to the front door, and then the door is locked and you go out of business, right? So this is sort of where public relations stops. Public relations stops at the entrance to your shop, digital or in real life. Because of that, what we want to focus on today with Google Analytics is the audience portion of the funnel. Yes, leads in the sense of people who walk into the coffee shop are important. And yes, obviously sales is what keeps the doors open, but public relations doesn't really have the ability to directly impact those areas. Now, certainly, if you get a great story or a social media influencer talks about your company, you can absolutely use that for testimonials. You can use it to advance sales. You can highlight customer success stories, but that's not what public relations is really good at. Public relations is really good at building audiences. So today in Google Analytics, we want to focus on the audience layer. How are we doing at building audiences? Where are they coming from? What are the sorts of things that they're interested in? And then to a certain degree, how do we measure the value of those leads that we drive into the sales process? Remember, back to the coffee shop example, we as public relations professionals are responsible for getting people to the door. We do not serve the coffee. Right? We do not swipe the credit card at the register. So let's dive in. If you have a Google Analytics account, this would be a great time to open it up and follow along. The first place we're going to go in Google Analytics before we go anywhere else is in the admin tab. I'm going to use my personal website here because I know there's a lot of folks who have all sorts of different size businesses. My personal website is enabled for all sorts of kind of features, so we'll be able to dive into stuff a lot. First place we want to go is admin. And inside admin, what we want to look at is goals. If you don't have any goals set up in Google Analytics, it's probably almost too harsh to say this, but if you don't have any goals, you're doing it wrong, right? You're just not using the application to its fullest potential. Without goals and goal values set up, all you're really looking at is, hey, who visited the website? With goals and goal values, now you can start to understand the value of the traffic you bring to the website. So let's look at a couple of examples here. This is my personal website again. So there's a couple of different things that I have going on. I'll bring the website up so that you can see it here. On my personal website, there's obviously the ability to fill in an email address. There's the ability to buy some items and things like that. There's some surveys and stuff. So my goals, I have a couple of different goals. One, I want you to fill out and sign up for my newsletter because that's important, right? Especially if you are a B2B business, that initial lead collection is important because your sales cycle may be 60, 90, 120 days. It could be years. I know there are companies that sell things like airplanes, right? You just typically, most of us, unless, I don't know, you're Bill Gates, most of us don't pull out a credit card and say, I'll just buy an airplane, swipe. That doesn't happen. So leads are important, but I also have transactional goals. Hey, you bought my book. These are also important things. So what kind of things do you need to set up a goal? You have to decide what things people can do on your website that are of value. Are they going to sign up for an appointment? They're going to make a reservation? Are they going to buy something? They hit a contact form? There's a bunch of pre-built goals in here, or you can make your own. Let's use a contact us. That's a pretty easy one to start with. You're going to decide how to measure the goal. And there's 4 different ways to measure goals. The easiest one that most people use on most websites is destination. This is like a thank you page. If you fill out the form, in fact, for those of you who are watching on the Shift Communications website, you are literally on the thank you page right now of our sign up form. So that would be a goal. Hey, you made it here, terrific. There are some other things you can set up for goals, but those are probably best for a non-basics webinar. So you'll want to know what the thank you page is. In this case, I'll put an example. Thank you So that's half of the puzzle. You figured out what constitutes a goal. Somebody did something of value. Downloaded an ebook, grabbed a white paper, signed up for a webinar. Hey, on your newsletter list. Could even be something as simple as requesting more information or a product PDF. The second thing you have to do is figure out what the dollar value of that goal is. Now, if you're doing e-commerce, if you're doing something for sale, the dollar value of the goal is pretty easy. If somebody hits the final stage of your shopping cart and they've bought your product, the dollar value of that goal is whatever the product is worth. And in fact, if you're using most e-commerce platforms, they will actually integrate with Google Analytics and pass the shopping cart value straight in. If, on the other hand, you are looking at a longer sales cycle where that lead has to eventually lead to a sale further down the line, then you have to infer the value of this action. So let's do some pretty basic math. Assume that you've got a website like this, and you've got a lead form, and it takes 100 people to fill out that form. In order for one sale, you have a bad sales force. So in order for one sale to actually close, right? So you have 100 leads to one sale, but the sale is worth $100. Everyone following along with that math? 100 leads to get to one sale, but the sale is worth $100. Therefore, if you work backwards, every lead is effectively worth $1, right? So we're estimating the value of the lead. And again, you will have to do this math with all of your own internal stuff. You have to look at your mailing list. How many people from your mailing list converted? How many people from social media converted? All of these things, work out the math until you figure out when someone fills out a lead form for a B2B or a complex sale, what's the value of that lead? So in this example, I could say that lead is worth $1. Setting up goals and goal values is so important because it's going to change how we look at every other part of the application and start to give us ROI. So that's the first basic. The next thing we want to do is look at, again, if we go back to our discussion earlier about what we care about audiences. So I'm going to go to the audience section here in Google Analytics. Now there's two kinds of audience. There are people who are new to your website. They're like, people who stroll by the front door of your retail store. They stop by for the first time. Hey, this looks like a cool coffee shop. And the second kind are people who are in the returning audience, the returning visitors. These are folks who have been to your shop, liked it. They may or may not have bought something, but they have come back. They have decided, hey, I think I might want to check this out again. In order to look at both, we're going to completely ignore the built-in features of new versus returning, and instead use the segment manager. So I'm going to click on Advanced to add segment. I'm going to go to the system segments because everybody should have these out of the box. I'm going to uncheck all sessions, and I want to see new and returning users. So I've selected both of these out of the list. So I'm going to hit the blue apply button. And now on my website, I can see the number of people who are new and the number of people who are returning. The users, the sessions, which is the number of times you visited, and the number of pages you visited. Now, what are we looking for here? As public relations professionals, what's our job? New audiences. But it just so happens that a lot of the content marketing that we do, a lot of the placed content, bylines, maybe a press release every now and again, will also bring people back who have remembered us. So we want to see new users go up pretty consistently. We for sure just want to see new users go up all the time. And we want to see returning users go up all the time, because the idea is if you are a new user, we've done our job. We've gotten somebody to the front of the coffee shop. But hopefully our work has also reminded you, if you've been to the coffee shop in the past, yeah, I should probably go back and visit that coffee shop and see what they've got for sale today. Ideally, again, because a lot of PR firms are now in charge of social media and content marketing, or in-house corporate communications has PR, social, and digital all under one VP of marketing, that you're going to want to see your returning users go up from those efforts, like creating a great blog, creating great social posts, and so on and so forth. So these two numbers are numbers that should be in all of your reporting. Without a doubt, new users, returning users, did you get more of them? Don't worry about the percentages. Don't worry about what percent. Worry about, did I get more over time rather than less? So if I change the time frame here to look at the year to date, And just for ease of viewing to smooth out those weekends, how am I doing? Well, I'm doing pretty okay on returning users. It's a pretty straight line. My new users, not so good. So if I was doing PR for myself, thank goodness I'm not. But if I was doing PR for myself, very clearly here, I would not be doing such a bang up job. Now, bear in mind, there are a lot of things that go into new users. It's not just public relations. There's digital advertising, there's email, there's SEO, there's all these different things. So we're going to want to dig into that, and we will in just a minute. But at the very least, when you see these numbers, if the overall new users number is not going up, either your VP of marketing, if you're in-house, or your client, if you're at an agency, going to be knocking on your door saying, hey, I don't think you guys are doing your job. So this is a super important number to first start out with. The second thing we want to understand about our users, about our audience, is what sort of audience do we have? There are all sorts of different measures in here, but the one that's going to be super important to many of us today is how many are using different kinds of devices. This is under the mobile section. So I'm going to click on mobile. I'm going to click on devices. And we can see here, I should probably turn these segments off because we don't want them for now. We'll just make them go away. And it defaults back to all sessions. I'm going to actually go to mobile overview, and I'll turn on this handy little pie chart. This is my year-to-date. Only 70% of my website visitors are coming on a desktop device. A full 23% are coming on a smartphone, and an additional 7.1% are coming on a tablet. And if I look at just this month, the numbers are about the same. This means that if my website is not mobile compatible, obviously 3 out of 4 people are going to get what they want, and 1 out of 4 people are not. That's not great odds. If I talked to my VP of sales and said, hey, I'm just going to intentionally piss off 1 out of 4 people, they're probably not going to be super happy with me. Now, how does this impact PR? Think about the mobile device. The mobile device changes your behavior, right? If you search on the desktop for, say, coffee shop, you're going to get what Google calls an informational query. Here's what, the history of coffee shops and where coffee shops began, and there'll be some local results and stuff. If you're on your mobile device, that's what Google calls a navigational query. It means that you probably want to know where the nearby coffee shop is. So if you're doing PR, if you're doing public relations, and you don't know that more people are using navigational queries than they are informational queries, you could be creating all these great infographics when really what your customers want is, where are you? Right? So it's important to understand how much of your website traffic is mobile. This is also really important because as of today, for those of you who keep up in the SEO world, Google is going to give favor on mobile devices to websites that are mobile friendly. So you should definitely take a look here. We used to say was a certain minimum number of people that you would need to have be mobile in order to have a mobile strategy. These days, you need a mobile strategy. There's no excuse not to have one. If you don't have a mobile strategy, I'm very sorry. You should probably get one immediately. So we've looked at new users, we've looked at returning users, and we kind of understand where those users are coming from, what we know about them. Let's go down into acquisition, because now we need to know where these people are coming from and how our public relations efforts impact them. The first place we're going to start is under what's called all traffic referrals. The definition of a referral is that it's website traffic. Visitors came from another site that is not social and not search, right? It's pretty much everything else. So if you are working in public relations, this is going to be the bread and butter of your entire existence, because most of the placements you get probably will have a digital component, right? Even if you get a TV show placement, for example, here in the Boston area, we have WCVB and we have Fox Boston. Even if you get a placement on one of these channels, there's going to be a video clip probably on that channel's website, and of course, that's going to send traffic to your story. So here we see the number of referrals. Take a look at the right-hand side of the screen. This is the dollar value of these different pieces of traffic. So let's look at Facebook. Right? That's line 4. Facebook has generated traffic worth about $40. If we look over here at Lifehacker, Lifehacker drove a ton of traffic to my website. Right? They did a really good job, but the e-commerce column is a bunch of zeros. So even though it was a great placement from a reputation perspective, it didn't sell anything. Now, again, well, keep in mind, PR is not responsible for sales, but if you can get a placement that can drive a lot of revenue, awesome. We were working with a client last November that got a huge placement on BuzzFeed. They sell apparel. And there's a story on BuzzFeed that linked to their product. And within, I think it was about 3 days, one PR hit generated about $36,000 in actual money in the bank revenue. Not an estimate, not a guess. It was actual real money that was generated from one hit. So referrals is a place that you need to be familiar with because it can see what's not only generating traffic, but also what is that traffic worth? Has it actually moved the needle for you? You can make the case that at a bare minimum, a hit that generated some money, put some real value in the place. But you need to have goals and goal values from the first part earlier in order to make this happen. Without this, this will all be zeros and you'll be sad. Take a look, make sure that as you look at this referral traffic, you'll want to maybe set this to 100 or 500 or even more depending on your website. You're going to want to see what sites are sending you traffic, what sites are sending people to your website. And did you, as a public relations professional, go out and do it? So here's a Social Media Examiner. I did a podcast with Mike Stelzner, and that has consistently generated a lot of people coming by and visiting and seeing what was on my website. Is a example of a good placement. We see Quantified Self, which is actually a placement I did not go and get. They found me. Again, as a PR professional, this is now where you would want to go and look in on this website and say, hey, is there an opportunity for us to work together? You already covered my product, my service, whatever the case may be. Maybe there's a way we can do a webinar together, or can I guest blog for you and create additional content? But you'll want to look through all of your referrals to see if there are things in here that are of a value that you can amplify. For example, here, referring site number 41 is Scott Monty, who is a coworker at Shift. This is if Scott was not a coworker, I could go to him and say, hey, would you mind a guest blog post? Can I help out in some way? The second thing we want to look at in acquisition, we've looked at referrals, we've looked at the placements that we've gotten. Bear in mind, they're not going to generate huge amounts of traffic because, again, a lot of publications, their intent is to keep you on their site and get you to their advertisers, but it's still better than nothing. The second place you're going to want to spend some time is in search engine optimization. Now, if you have not connected, or your IT department or your marketing department has not connected your Google Analytics account with your free Google Webmaster Tools account, you're probably going to see not much of anything here. But if you have got those two free services bound together, you're going to want to look in the SEO section first for queries. There's two types of search. There's what's called branded and unbranded search. Branded search is when somebody searches for your company name. So in this case, because this is my personal website, Chris Penn and Christopher Penn are logical reasons why people should be searching for me. And this is a number, the number of clicks I got is a number that I want to keep an eye on. Also the position on page, because this is my name. This is if it was your company, you'd want to be looking for your company name there, like Shift Communications or Starbucks Coffee and so on and so forth. This branded search is super important because if public relations is doing its job right, remember, it's about using media to build audience. People should be hearing about you. People should be learning what your company is about. And once they hear about you, they read about you in the paper, they see you on broadcast TV, they see your Facebook page. What's the first thing most people do? They will go search for it. Right? So you want to see branded search constantly going up. This data is data that you can export and look at every couple of months. I recommend you check in about once a month to see how your branded search is increasing or decreasing. Are you showing up more? Are you getting more of the clicks? And is your position on page improving? Branded search, super important. It's a core measurement of public relations work. Now, the other side of the story, the other side of the coin is what's called unbranded search. These are all the things, if we look down here in 3 through 10 on my my SEO queries here. These are things that are searches that my website receives, or in actually switches to clicks here. These are clicks that my site gets for stuff that are not necessarily my name. So I wrote a blog post discussing Netflix's core competencies. They have a great SlideShare app, and I get a certain percentage of those clicks. I wrote a blog post a long time ago, about 8 years ago now, on the differences between two types of decongestant. Surprisingly, that gets a lot of clicks, and a few other things in here. As a PR professional, if you are, there's a couple of different things you can take out of this. Number one, if your key industry keywords and phrases, like if I'm writing marketing books, I'm kind of sad to not see the words marketing books in here somewhere. It means that I'm not doing a good enough job with my own public relations, so that when people search for marketing books, A, I come up, and B, I get the clicks for it. If I was looking for, say, marketing public speaker, because that's kind of one of the things I do, again, it's not in here, kind of wish it were, and it gives me an idea of what I should be getting the clicks for. So non-branded search tells you what you are getting clicks for, what topics the internet thinks you are relevant for, and what topics the internet thinks you are not necessarily relevant for. So that's one way to look at this data. The second way to look at this data is, I'm going to switch this down to click-through rate. I want to look at the click-through rate. So what am I getting 100% of the clicks for, even if I don't get very many of them? We'll expand this up a little bit. Keep scrolling down until you get out of the bare minimum number of clicks, which could take a while. There we go. Look at some of the terms that I do get clicks for. Examples of thinking outside the box, marketing campaign outline. These are pitchable ideas. You're already getting a high number of clicks for them. And if you don't have content on your site already about it, if you don't have a story that you're out there pitching, this is a great place to find additional things. So again, if I was pitching my personal website out to the world, I might write a blog post on how to make a marketing campaign outline, or an infographic, or a YouTube video, something that would take advantage of this term, because I'm already getting a decent number of clicks out of it. I probably should go out and get more of them. So this is an important way to build your site's authority around topics that you're already popular for, even if you're not getting a huge amount of traffic out of it. So a very useful way to look at the evaluation of the PR work you're doing from a search perspective. Again, if you are doing public relations, you are about building audiences through media and PR. The final metric we want to cover in today's webinar, when it comes to all this the Google Analytics basics, is in conversions. And what we specifically want to look at is what's called multi-channel funnels. Prior to August 24th, 2011, a very significant date for those of us who are in marketing analytics, whenever somebody did something on your website, you got what was called last click, or last touch attribution, or last click interaction. This means that no matter how many steps somebody took, the last thing they did was what got credit. So imagine you're working in your corporate communications role, and you've done a great job with webinars. You've got some great placements, some stories, some broadcast media, and the marketing department sends out an email saying, "Hey, you saw us on the news. Click here to buy our product." Prior to August 24th, 2011, that email newsletter would have gotten all the credit, even though you did most of the work, right? You got the broadcast placement, you got the great story, and the email went out. And because software was not sophisticated enough to figure that out, the email got all the credit, you got none, and you got no respect out of it, which is not a great place to be. Multi-channel funnels change is that I'm going to switch over to assisted conversions here. Assisted conversions tells us what things contributed to the conversion, but were not necessarily the last thing somebody did. So back to that example earlier. You went out, you got the broadcast hit, you got a placement on a industry influencer's social media page, you got a story in the newspaper. All of those things were not the email that marketing sent out, but under multi-channel funnels, those things will be given partial credit for the actual conversion. Now, again, this is all contingent upon having goals and goal values set up. If you don't have that set up, this will all be blank, and you'll be sad. Um, let's look here at social media, right? Social networks. So, is social media working for me? Well, 51 of the sales of on my personal website worth $158 were from the last touch, right? The last interaction somebody had. They saw a tweet or a Facebook post, they clicked it and they hit buy. Hooray, I made some money. But that's not the whole story. If you look in the previous column, 27 sales contributed to an additional $80 in value. Think of assisted conversions like Jenga. If you ever played the board game Jenga, if you have not, I apologize. It is a game where you make a tower full of blocks. Players take turns pulling blocks out one at a time until the tower falls over. This is kind of the same idea. This is digital Jenga, where if you were to say, well, I don't think that whole Twitter thing's working out for us. Let's just stop using Twitter and focus on referral traffic. That's really what's most important here. Well, is it? Because if you pull out that Jenga block, that Twitter block, those assisted conversions and that revenue might go away. It might not. It might. But if you're trying to make the case for the value of what you're doing, this is a great place to illustrate. Hey, not only did we drive some direct sales, but we also drove some assisted sales. We helped some sales along. Likewise, your referral traffic is in here. So if you've gotten some great placements, and you can actually see them if you click over to Source Medium, you can see on an individual level what things got the actual clicks, both assisted and real. These, you can say, look at this and say, well, the Marketing Blue Belt website is set up is working pretty well for me, and my email newsletter is working really well. My own Twitter social stuff, it's not bad, and certainly I don't want to throw away this value. But it's a way of seeing a much more complete picture of the value that you are generating. So assisted conversions can take all that stuff that we've looked at in the first two sections, in audience and acquisition, and help showcase the value that you're providing. This is the first part of establishing the ROI of public relations, because you have to be able to infer what the value of some of the traffic you've brought in through referrals. You have to be able to infer on the value, if you're managing social media for your company or for your client, what the value of that traffic is. And then even search, a certain percentage of search traffic is going to come in from public relations efforts. You have to go do the homework, and that's probably for a non-basics webinar, but you have to go and do the homework to figure out what percentage of search is really from you, and then go measure that and infer the value of it. Now, there's a couple of things we want to talk about briefly here. First of all, Google Analytics can't measure some things. There are some places where it breaks down. Google Analytics has a very difficult time measuring when somebody leaves the clickstream. So, for example, I see a webinar from your company, and then I forget about your company exists, and then I see a bus sign for some reason. It just reminds me, oh yeah, your company exists. I go and I search it. If enough time passes, Google Analytics is going to say that the webinar and the bus sign are not related, even though they are. I'm the same person, but there are time gaps. Google Analytics has about a 90-day window that it can look at before it loses track of somebody. That's the first thing where the clickstream breaks. The second thing is where clickstreams are non-direct. So I and my coworker Zach are standing around the water cooler. I say, hey, Zach, you really should check out this local coffee shop. Zach goes and Googles for it, or goes and buys something. Google can't see that, right? We would hope that they can't see that, because it would mean they were listening into our water cooler conversations. So really, really important to that we understand there are going to be times when the clickstream just absolutely breaks and it's not going to be reliable. And the third is, again, where there are things that originate outside the clickstream. So I read about you in the physical copy of the New York Times, and I Google for you. Organic search will be considered the originating touch point, even though the New York Times, the physical paper edition, is what got me started. So you will have to do some amount of surveying of your audience to ask them, hey, what's going on? How did you hear about us? Or as Tom Webster of Edison Research likes to say, why did you choose us? Asking people that will give you a lot more depth and a lot more understanding of how your PR activities are informing these digital activities. So those are the limitations of Google Analytics. And obviously, there are also some additional settings where Google Analytics may not be available to you. There are certain very high security places like the military, the intelligence community, and even in some healthcare environments where Google Analytics simply will not be permitted there. So it's one of those things that just be aware, if it's not available to you, there may be another avenue, another option for you. So with that, we've covered the major things about Google Analytics. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go into Twitter and check in to see what questions you guys have. If you have questions, please tweet them using this hashtag GAPR101. And we can go through and answer some questions. The first question here comes from Jessica Parry saying, how do I delete a goal? And I actually don't believe that you can. I believe you can reuse it and you can turn it off. But I believe once a goal is in place, you would need assistance from the engineering team in order to do that. Google does provide engineering teams to its certified partners. So go into the Google Analytics partner directory and find a partner, and they may be able to help you get all connected and wired up. Let's look for additional questions here. How much does it cost to set up Google Analytics on a client's website for PR purposes? That's a really good question Josh Turner asked. And the answer is it wildly varies. It really depends. And the reason why is that there are so many different ways that a company can use Google Analytics, and there's so many unusual configurations of company websites. I was working on one that was a Drupal website, which Drupal is a content management system, a lot like WordPress. If you've ever done any blogging, Drupal's kind of competitor to WordPress. And the client had set up 3 different kinds of forms, with 3 different ways those forms could be filled out, with 3 different kinds of thank you pages. One that appeared in page, one that was a separate page, one that just flashed a message on the screen. And so that was a much more complex setup than, say, the Shift Communications website, which was relatively straightforward and easy to set up. So how much do you charge? It really varies, and it depends on the complexity of the problems that you're trying to solve. Tony Hardman said, disagree about linked referral traffic and stories. Unless it's a tech outlet, in my experience, large media won't link. It depends on the media. Yes, some tech outlets, and there are some outlets where, again, if they are top-tier journalistic outlets, absolutely, they may not link. That's why surveying is so important. How did you hear about us? There is on every single web form that you have, on every single intake form, if you have a physical brick and mortar shop, there should be a little card at the register, and all the time you should be asking people, how did you hear about us? That's how you're going to understand what's really working. We did this last year. We try and do it every year, and we asked people, how did you hear about us? We looked in the database, and would you believe it, a full 20% of what we see on our website as search traffic is actually people who heard about us from an offline event. Most often they were having coffee with our CEO, Todd Deffrin, or our co-founder, Jim Joyle. And they said, hey, Todd or Jim told me about you guys, and I wanted to come check you out. So you absolutely positively must have, how did you hear about us on your web forms? And please do not make it a drop-down. That is the lazy way out, and you'll get bad answers. Leave it as a single text field, and you're going to have somebody read through those responses and sort of tally them up. Oh yeah, had coffee with Todd, had coffee with Todd, had beer with Todd, had coffee and beer with Todd, and so on and so forth. But you absolutely must have that. If you don't, it's going to be a very, very bad time. Brittany asked, how do you set goals if you don't have sales data to quantify them? You have to have some revenue goal or some tangible goal that has a revenue equivalent somewhere in your process, because to my knowledge, there is not a single organization that at some point does not need money, at the very least, to pay for rent and keeping the lights on. If you don't have that at all, then you can infer it. There's, for example, if you had a newsletter, and you're getting people to sign up for your newsletter as the goal. Well, this is a terrible way to do this. You're much better with revenue, but if you absolutely had no data whatsoever, you can say, what would it have cost me to buy that email list? If I went to a list broker, what would it have cost me? Again, please don't use this if there's any better data available. But if you absolutely positively have nothing, you can infer at least what money did I not spend that I was able to recoup, that I was able to generate through public relations efforts. Ideally, though, You can do the math. You can talk to your sales department. If you're a publicly traded company and your company will not even tell you, what sales numbers you have, you can actually look in their SEC filings and see how much revenue came in, how much net new revenue came in for each quarter, and then kind of work backwards. Say, well, I got 1,000 leads for my division of the company, and in our filing it said that our division earned $82 million. You can start to infer the value of those things. But again, as best as possible, try to work with your marketing team and your sales team to create those inferred goal values. Let's see. Moses asked, why would Bing.com show up as a referral source? Well, because you're getting traffic from Bing. That's why. Bing is a search engine. If you're not familiar with it, it's kind of like Google but run by Microsoft, and it will absolutely refer traffic to you. So keep that in mind. Peter Osborne asked, if I have a campaign in progress but I don't have goals, can I set them up today and get data from the past 30 days? That's a super important question. The answer is no. Google Analytics is never retroactive. Say that again. Google Analytics is never retroactive. So if you think you're going to have something happen down the line, turn on tracking today. If you're launching a new website but you're not ready to launch, still put out your Google Analytics account and get it rolling today, because you cannot look back at the data. You can only look forward at the data. You can make adjustments to the data later on, but please turn all the buttons on as soon as you can, because that's the only way that you're going to get all of that information out of Google. It's a little bit more advanced, but there are some things in the property settings that you'll probably want to turn on. A couple of them would be enabling advertising features and demographics and interest reports. These are in the miscellaneous section. Even if you don't have any use for them today, even if you have, not even sure what those buttons do, turn them on. You're better off turning them on than not turning them on, because that's the way Google Analytics just happens to work. Let's see, you have a whole bunch of new questions here. Excellent. How can you watch the webinar again? It'll be up on the exact same page that you're watching it right now. It will just be a YouTube video. You can hit play, and we'll also send you an email after the webinar with all of the links to it. Let's see, other questions here. Can you get Don Schindler asks, can you get rid of referrals like Semalt? Aren't they just a spamming social media tool? Good question. There's actually if you go into the admin section here, and you go into view settings, so that individual view, which is the third column on the right, you can actually tell it to exclude hits from known bots and spiders. This will get rid of a lot of junk that comes in. So Semalt, I know, is one of those many tools, as well as any other kind of spidering tools. It's a really good way of getting rid of stuff. Roger Knight asks, do you have any goal examples for nonprofits? Great question. So there's a couple of different major goals for nonprofits. Number one, most nonprofits take donations. I have not seen a single nonprofit that does not ask get money from somewhere. So if, for example, you have a donation form, try and pick a donation platform that has e-commerce functionality that can integrate with Google Analytics. That way, the dollar value of the donations come in, they look and are treated like sales in Google Analytics, but of course, they're really donations for your nonprofit. So it's a terrific way to build that. If you have non-tangible things, there are still ways to measure those. So for example, I work with one nonprofit whose primary job is to build audience. They want to build up this large audience. Again, we can say for a goal, well, what would it have cost you to build that audience? A different way, not a great way to measure it, but the moment that they decide they want to monetize this audience, say, well, we want to sell advertising, or we want to sell a physical good at our nonprofit store, then we can again work backwards and say, well, that group of 1 million people who bought $100,000 worth of stuff, now we know each of those visitors could be worth 10 cents. It's a really straightforward way. Now, there is one example that I can think of where there's definitely not a monetary outcome, and that would be if you are, say, a politician, right? There's a binary outcome, which is you are either elected into office or not. And I suppose you could count the bribes that you would receive as revenue, but for for Google Analytics purposes, you can't put that in here. So you would still want to say, okay, well, what is it going to cost me to run this election campaign from paid sources? I can substitute in some level of those unpaid sources that you're getting from public relations to help out and infer those values. Guillermo Saavedra is asking why socialbuttons.com is one of your main referrals. Why am I getting a lot of traffic from Russia when I am in Chile? Again, you get traffic from all over the planet. One of the things you may want to look at in your reporting is you may want to look in the audience section under geography and see where you're getting your traffic from. If you're getting traffic from places you didn't expect it, dig in to see what specific traffic you're getting. Where is it coming from? You may have to build a custom report for that, but it may be a market opportunity. So, for example, I know that about 6% of my traffic comes from the United Kingdom, and another 5% comes from Canada. If I wanted to do a campaign to market to those countries, those would be the first places I would start an international marketing initiative. But if you're getting traffic and that you don't want, simply filter it out. You can do so in the admin section, or just ignore it. It's not going to hurt you at all to filter it out. You can, in your sessions, in your segments, you can actually make a segment geographically specific. So you can say, I want to see all traffic, but only from the United States, or all traffic only from Canada, if you're really focused on your local market, which you may very well be. So keep that in mind there. Oh, Most was asking, search engines and social will not show up as referral sources if it's not Google, that is. Jackie asks, are links from my email included in direct traffic? The answer is yes, if the links are not tagged. There's a tool that Google has called the URL Builder, and the URL Builder allows you to take any URL, so like the links from your email, and paste it in here and then add your tracking codes. If you're working with any kind of decent email marketing company, it's like MailChimps and stuff like that of the world, or if you're working with a good marketing automation provider like a Marketo or a Pardot or a HubSpot, they're going to automatically fill these tags in so that the links are pre-populated with the content that, like, it came from HubSpot or it came from Marketo, it was an email, and so on and so forth. This tool, the URL Builder, is what you would use for everything else. So you would put your website URL here. So I could put in, say, www.shiftcom.com is the destination, and maybe I was doing a webinar, so I could put Google Plus. I could say this is a webinar, and I could put a campaign name in here. This is April 21, and then I would use this link that it generated in my webinar. If I was doing this in an email, I might say this is instead of a webinar, this is an email. But again, I would hit that, and then this is the link that I would use to track and to separate out that direct traffic. Because to Jackie's point, it's really important. Google puts into the category of direct anything it doesn't understand. It's like, not really sure where this came from, so we're just going to call it direct. So separating out is super important, and this is one of the easiest ways to do it. Again, try to use decent marketing automation or email marketing software. It will auto tag a lot of that stuff for you. Rachel asks, would you suggest in Google Analytics to track interactions on the site, i.e. sharing on social? You absolutely can track that if somebody clicks a share button on your website. If the share buttons are yours or they're a plugin that allows you to do what's called event tracking. Google Analytics, this is a much more advanced topic, but Google Analytics allows you to tag individual elements on your web page, like submit buttons and social buttons and stuff, and then record the number of times people click on those things. If we go to my website, for example, if you were to go to one of my earlier book pages where there's a click out to Amazon, I can't measure Amazon.com, right? It is not my website, and Google Analytics can't measure it, but I can measure the number of times you click on the link to go to Amazon, and then I can reverse engineer and say, well, I sold $100 worth of books on Amazon last month, and I got 10 clicks on the Amazon link, so I can infer that the value of clicks on that link might be $10 a link, $10 a click. And that's one way you can measure those interactions on site. But again, if you're tracking sharing and social media doesn't do anything for you, then you may not necessarily have a value attached, but you absolutely can do that. Ali asks, can you get click-through data for specific states, counties, and cities? Yes, you can. You can actually go down to the DMA. So let's take a look here. So you can get country, city, continent. So I'm going to look inside the United States here at my website. Let's look into Massachusetts. I can see down to the city or into the metro area where my website traffic is coming from. So here, this is the Boston, Manchester DMA. Not super useful if you want the individual city locations. And I can see here that this big dot, that's Newton. Of course, it's going to be, I would probably want to filter that out. But these are all the places in Massachusetts, like Methuen and so on and so forth, where my site is getting traffic. So you can get very, very granular. And what's really powerful is that, later on in the non-basics webinar, you can actually do kind of different types of ad targeting even to people who have been to your website from certain locations. Let's see. I think, unless anyone else wants to tweet very, very quickly to the hashtag, I think we've managed to nail most of the questions. So just a couple of requisite plugs. If you want to learn more, we've covered a tremendous amount of information about Google Analytics in 50 minutes, which is kind of tough to digest. So if you want to learn more, Google has a free course called Analytics Academy that will walk you through all the major pieces of the Google Analytics platform and teach it to you. There's live there's pre-recorded videos and walkthroughs. There's transcripts, and this is a great way to learn the application at your own pace. As you have time to do so. It's totally and completely free. And as a bonus, if you complete all this and you do a great job with all four of the mini courses, you will actually probably be in pretty good shape to take the Google Analytics individual qualification, the exam that is required in order for you to become a Google Analytics certified professional. It's worth doing because at the very least, you're going to learn a whole lot about the analytics platform and what it can and can't do, how it works in things like mobile applications, which we did not touch on at all today, but it is well worth your time. If you are so inclined, please subscribe to the Shift weekly newsletter. Shift happens at shiftcom.com/subscribe. It's a lot of fun, and we cover measurement and analytics stuff each week, along with many, many other things. And in the slides, I'll have some additional Google Analytics posts that you can read that will help lend some more depth to some of the things today. But I wanted to say, if you wanted some help with getting your Google Analytics or any of your marketing metrics up to scratch, we're certainly happy to have a chat with you. Thank you very much for tuning in today, and you'll be getting a follow-up email with the recording, the slides, and all that stuff after this. So thank you so much for being on the webinar.